The Arizona sun beat mercilessly on the red earth as Sarah McKenna guided her horse down the rocky trail toward the settlement of Copper Creek. Her calloused hands gripped the reins with practiced ease, though her heart hammered against her ribs, with each mile that brought her closer to Apache territory. The year was 1883, and tensions between the white settlers and the Chiricahua Apache had reached a boiling point. Sarah had traveled from Kansas after receiving word that her brother Thomas needed help with his trading post. The letter, worn thin, from her constant handling during the 3-week journey, spoke of opportunity and new beginnings. What it hadn't mentioned was the constant threat of Apache raids that had driven most settlers either away or into heavily fortified compounds. As she crested a hill, the vast landscape spread before her like a painting rendered in shades of copper and gold. Saguaro cacti stood like ancient sentinels against the endless sky, while distant mountains shimmered in the heat haze. Despite the beauty, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Stories of Apache warriors who could move like shadows across this terrain had followed her from Kansas, each tale more terrifying than the last. The trading post appeared suddenly around a bend, a modest adobe structure with wooden additions that spoke of her brother's practical nature. Thomas McKenna emerged from the doorway, his face breaking into a relieved smile as he recognized his sister's approach. His weathered features and sun-darkened skin told the story of 3 years in this harsh land. "Sarah, thank God you made it safely," Thomas called out, reaching up to help her down from her horse. "I was beginning to worry the Apache might have spotted you on the trail." "I saw no one," Sarah replied, though she didn't mention the prickle of awareness that had followed her for the last 10 miles. "Your letter made it sound urgent. What's happened?" Thomas's expression grew serious as he led her horse to the small corral behind the building. "The Apache have been more active lately. Chief Nalnish's band has been seen near the lake. That's only 5 miles from here. Most of the other traders have pulled out, but I can't abandon 3 years of work, not when we're finally starting to turn a profit." Inside the trading post, Sarah marveled at her brother's inventory. Bolts of fabric sat alongside ammunition, while tools and household goods filled every available space. It was clear Thomas had worked hard to establish relationships with both settlers and the occasional Apache who came to trade. "You're the only family I have left, Sarah," Thomas continued, pouring her a cup of coffee that had been sitting on the stove too long. "Since Mary died in childbirth last winter, I've been trying to manage everything alone. I need someone I can trust, someone who understands that this isn't just about money. It's about building something that lasts." Sarah studied her brother's face, seeing the loneliness and determination etched in every line. She had left nothing behind in Kansas except memories of her deceased husband and a small farm that barely supported her. The prospect of starting fresh appealed to her, even if it meant living on the edge of danger. "What about the Apache?" she asked directly. "You mentioned Chief Nalnish. What do you know about him?" Thomas set down his coffee cup and moved to the window, gazing out at the desert landscape. "He's different from the other leaders. Younger, maybe 35, but respected by his people. They say he's never attacked a settlement without provocation, but he's fierce when defending his territory. His band includes about 40 warriors, and they know this land better than we ever will." "And they trade here?" "Sometimes. Nalnish himself has never come, but some of his people have. They're cautious, but fair. They pay in silver coins they've somehow acquired. Never try to cheat or intimidate." Thomas paused, his voice dropping. "The problem is the new territorial governor. He's talking about forcing all Apache onto reservations, regardless of whether they've caused trouble. That's got everyone on edge." Sarah absorbed this information while examining the trading post more closely. The thick adobe walls and small windows spoke of security concerns, but the well-organized inventory suggested her brother had found a way to make this dangerous venture work. As evening approached, Thomas showed her to the small room he'd prepared behind the main store. The space was simple but clean, with a narrow bed and a wash basin. Through the single window, Sarah could see the desert stretching endlessly toward the mountains, painted in brilliant oranges and purples by the setting sun. "Tomorrow I'll show you how everything works," Thomas said. "The supply wagon comes through once a month, and we get customers maybe 3 times a week. It's not the life we knew in Kansas, but it's honest work and there's room to grow." That night, as Sarah lay in her narrow bed listening to the desert winds, she wondered what she had gotten herself into. Somewhere out there in the darkness, Apache warriors moved through their ancestral lands, while she, a woman alone except for her brother, had chosen to make her home on the very edge of 2 worlds that seemed destined for conflict. The howl of a coyote echoed across the desert, followed by the distant answer of another. In those wild voices, Sarah heard both the beauty and the danger of this new life she had chosen. 3 weeks had passed since Sarah's arrival at Copper Creek, and she had settled into the rhythm of desert life more easily than she had expected. The trading post kept her busy with inventory management and the occasional customer, while Thomas handled the more dangerous task of meeting supply wagons on the main trail. The Apache had been quiet during this time, though Thomas remained vigilant, checking their surroundings each morning for signs of movement. On this particular morning, the heat was already oppressive by dawn. Sarah decided to ride to the lake Thomas had mentioned, a precious water source 5 miles north that provided the trading post with fresh water during the dry season. She had been there twice before with Thomas, but today she wanted to go alone, to think and to feel truly connected to this strange, beautiful land. The lake sat in a depression between 2 red rock formations, fed by an underground spring that kept it cool even in the height of summer. Ancient cottonwood trees provided blessed shade around its edges, their leaves whispering secrets to the desert wind. Sarah dismounted and let her horse drink while she filled the water containers Thomas had given her. The peace of the place was profound. She could hear nothing but the gentle lapping of water against the shore and the rustle of leaves overhead. For the first time since arriving in Arizona, Sarah felt her shoulders relax completely. She sat on a fallen log and allowed herself to imagine what it might have been like to live here before the coming of white settlers, when only the Apache knew these hidden places. The sound of laughter broke her reverie. High and joyous it was, unmistakably the voice of a child. Sarah froze, her hand instinctively moving to the rifle Thomas had insisted she carry. Moving carefully through the trees, she peered around a large cottonwood and saw them. 3 Apache children played at the water's edge about 50 yards away. 2 appeared to be girls of perhaps 8 and 10, while the third was a boy who couldn't have been more than 6. They splashed and laughed with the universal joy of children at play, completely absorbed in their game. Their horses stood patiently nearby, beautiful painted ponies that spoke of a people who understood these animals in ways Sarah was only beginning to appreciate. Sarah knew she should retreat immediately. If Apache children were here, adults couldn't be far away. But something about their innocent joy held her transfixed. The boy, smaller than the others, was trying to keep up with the girls as they waded deeper into the lake. He laughed as he struggled to match their longer strides, his dark eyes bright with determination. Then everything changed in an instant. The boy stepped into a hidden drop-off and disappeared beneath the surface. The girls' laughter turned to screams of terror as they realized their companion was in trouble. Sarah watched in horror as the child's head broke the surface once, his small arms flailing desperately, before he went under again. Without thinking, Sarah burst from her hiding place and ran toward the water. The girls saw her coming and cried out in Apache, their voices sharp with fear and confusion. Sarah ignored them, kicking off her boots as she reached the water's edge. The boy surfaced again, farther from shore now, his struggles growing weaker. Sarah dove into the lake, her long skirt tangling around her legs as she fought her way toward the drowning child. The water was deeper and colder than she had expected, and the boy had already gone under for the 3rd time. She took a deep breath and dove down, searching frantically in the murky water until her hands found the small, limp form, breaking the surface with the child in her arms. Sarah fought her way back to shore, hampered by her heavy, waterlogged clothing. The two girls had waded in as far as they dared, reaching out to help pull their friend to safety. Together, they managed to get the unconscious boy onto the sandy shore. Sarah had seen drowning before, during a flood in Kansas. She turned the child onto his stomach and pressed firmly on his back, forcing water from his lungs. The boy coughed violently and began to breathe, his eyes fluttering open as he looked around in confusion. The girls were speaking rapidly in Apache, clearly explaining what had happened. The boy's gaze found Sarah, and she saw no fear there, only the natural curiosity of a child trying to understand what had occurred. He spoke a few words in his own language, his voice still hoarse from the water he had swallowed. "I don't understand," Sarah said gently, brushing wet hair from the boy's forehead. "But you're safe now. You're going to be fine." The sound of approaching horses froze, all of them. Through the trees came a group of Apache warriors, their faces grim with concern that quickly transformed into something far more dangerous when they saw Sarah kneeling beside the children. The lead rider was a man of perhaps 35, his presence commanding even at a distance. His dark hair was streaked with premature silver, and his eyes held the weight of leadership. Sarah slowly stood, her hands raised to show she carried no weapons. Water dripped from her clothes, and she was acutely aware of how vulnerable she appeared. The warriors surrounded them, their horses dancing nervously as their riders assessed the situation. The two girls ran to the lead warrior, speaking rapidly in Apache and gesturing toward Sarah and the boy. Sarah caught the word for water several times and saw the man's expression change as he understood what had happened. The boy, now sitting up with help from one of the girls, added his own voice to the explanation. The Apache leader dismounted and approached Sarah slowly. His eyes never left her face as he knelt beside the boy, checking him with the careful hands of a father. When he was satisfied that the child was unharmed, he stood and faced Sarah directly. "You saved my son," he said in accented but clear English. "I am Nalnish." Sarah felt her heart skip a beat. This was the Apache chief Thomas had spoken of, the leader whose very name struck fear into the hearts of settlers throughout the territory. And she had just saved his son's life. "I am Sarah McKenna," she replied, surprised by the steadiness of her own voice. Anyone would have done the same. Nalnish studied her for a long moment, his dark eyes seeming to look into her very soul. Around them, the other warriors waited for their leader's judgment, their hands resting casually but meaningfully on their weapons. "Not anyone," Nalnish said finally. "Many of your people would have let an Apache child drown. You risked your life for one who is not your blood, not your people." He paused, glancing at his son who was now standing shakily but smiling at Sarah. This debt cannot be repaid with words. Word of the rescue spread through both communities faster than Sarah had thought possible. Within days, every settler within 50 miles knew that Sarah McKenna had saved the son of Chief Nalnish, while the Apache spoke in their own councils of the white woman who had shown courage and compassion, where others might have shown fear or indifference. Thomas was both proud and terrified when Sarah told him what had happened. "You did the right thing," he assured her as they worked together in the trading post. "But this changes everything. The Apache have long memories for both kindness and cruelty. You've made yourself significant to them, and that's not always a safe thing to be." 3 days after the incident at the lake, Sarah was organizing bolts of fabric when she heard horses approaching. Through the window, she saw a small group of Apache riders, led by Nalnish himself. Her breath caught as she recognized the dignified figure of the chief, but this time he was not accompanied by warriors. Instead, an older woman rode beside him, clearly someone of importance based on the elaborate beadwork on her clothing and the respectful way the others deferred to her. Thomas emerged from the back room, his hand instinctively moving toward his rifle before he caught himself. "Chief Nalnish," he said formally, "you're welcome at our trading post." Nalnish dismounted and helped the older woman down from her horse. The boy Sarah had rescued was there too, healthy and bright-eyed, staying close to what was obviously his grandmother. The chief approached the doorway but stopped just outside, a gesture of respect that surprised both Sarah and Thomas. "I come to speak with Sarah McKenna," Nalnish said. "My mother, Desba, wishes to meet the woman who saved her grandson's life." Sarah stepped forward, suddenly aware that this moment would define not just her relationship with these people, but possibly the future of the trading post itself. The older Apache woman studied her with shrewd, intelligent eyes that missed nothing. Desba spoke in Apache, her voice carrying the authority of age and wisdom. Nalnish translated, though Sarah sensed he was softening some of the directness of his mother's words. "She says you have the heart of a warrior, but the hands of a healer. She asks why you chose to save a child of your enemies." Sarah considered her answer carefully. She had been thinking about this question herself for 3 days, trying to understand what had driven her to act without hesitation. "He wasn't my enemy," Sarah said simply. "He was a child in danger. I couldn't stand by and watch him drown any more than I could watch any child drown." When Nalnish translated her words, Desba nodded slowly. She reached into a leather pouch at her side and withdrew something wrapped in soft buckskin. Approaching Sarah, she placed the bundle in her hands and spoke again. "This belonged to my grandmother," Nalnish explained. "It is a medicine bag blessed by our holy men. She wants you to have it as protection and as a sign that you are welcome among our people." Sarah unwrapped the buckskin to reveal a small, leather pouch decorated with intricate beadwork in blues and whites. The craftsmanship was exquisite, speaking of hours of careful work and deep spiritual significance. She felt the weight of the gift's meaning and was momentarily overwhelmed. "I'm honored," Sarah said, looking directly at Desba. "Tell her I will treasure this always." The old woman smiled for the first time, her weathered face transforming with warmth. She spoke to her grandson, who had been watching everything with the intense curiosity of childhood. The boy approached Sarah shyly and held out his hand. In his palm lay a small stone, perfectly smooth and an unusual shade of blue. "He found this at the bottom of the lake," Nalnish explained. "He wants you to have it to remember the day you gave him back his life." Sarah knelt to the boy's level and accepted the stone solemnly. "What's his name?" she asked. "In your language?" "It would be Swift Running Water," Nalnish replied, pride evident in his voice. "Thank you, Swift Running Water," Sarah said to the boy. "I will keep this stone close to my heart." The formal atmosphere began to relax as Thomas invited the group inside the trading post. Nalnish examined the goods with the eye of someone who understood both quality and fair dealing. He selected several items, ammunition, a knife, and some coffee beans, and paid with silver coins just as Thomas had described. "Your brother has dealt fairly with my people," Nalnish told Sarah as the transaction concluded. "This is good. Trust is not easily built between our peoples, but it is possible." As the Apache prepared to leave, Desba spoke once more to her son, her tone becoming serious. Nalnish nodded and turned to Sarah. "My mother wishes me to tell you something important. There are changes coming to this territory. The new governor speaks of forcing all Apache onto reservations, whether we have caused trouble or not. Some of our young warriors grow angry and speak of war. Others, like myself, hope to find another path." Sarah felt a chill that had nothing to do with the evening air. "What does this mean for us?" "It means that the friendship you have earned may be tested in difficult times. But it also means you have allies, where you might have had enemies. This trading post sits between two worlds. Perhaps it can become a bridge instead of a target." After they left, Sarah and Thomas sat in the fading light, processing what had occurred. The medicine bag rested in Sarah's hands and she could feel the smooth blue stone in her pocket. "Do you think it's possible?" Sarah asked. "Can this place really become a bridge between our peoples?" Thomas was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the desert where the Apache had disappeared like shadows into the landscape. "I don't know," he said finally, "but after today, I think it might be worth trying. You've changed something here, Sarah. The question is whether we can build on it before the politicians and the army decide our fate for us." That night, Sarah dreamed of children playing by a lake while their parents, Apache and White, watched from the shore in peaceful coexistence. When she woke, she found herself touching the medicine bag and wondering if dreams could sometimes point toward possibilities that the waking world hadn't yet imagined. 2 months passed in relative peace after Nalnish's visit to the trading post. Sarah had settled into a routine that felt more natural with each passing day. She had learned to read the subtle signs of the desert, the way the light changed before a storm, the calls of different birds, the tracks that told stories of the creatures that moved through this landscape. More importantly, she had begun to understand the delicate balance that kept the trading post functioning on the edge of two worlds. The Apache came more frequently now, though always in small groups and always with the careful courtesy of people who understood they were taking a risk. Sarah noticed that Nalnish never came himself, but his presence was felt in the respectful behavior of his people and the quality of the goods they brought to trade. Silver coins, beautiful pottery, and occasionally items that spoke of successful raids on Mexican settlements far to the south. Thomas had begun teaching Sarah some basic Apache words, and she practiced them with the children who sometimes accompanied the trading parties. Swift running water had come twice with his grandmother, and each time he sought out Sarah with the natural affection of a child, for someone who had shown him kindness. But the peace was fragile, and Sarah could feel the tension, building like pressure before a thunderstorm. News from the territorial capital spoke of increasing military patrols and stricter policies regarding Apache movements. More ominously, other trading posts had been abandoned as their owners fled east, unable to handle the stress of living in constant uncertainty. The crisis came on a scorching afternoon in late August. Sarah was alone at the trading post, Thomas having ridden to meet a delayed supply wagon, when she heard the sound of many horses approaching fast. Her blood turned to ice as she recognized the blue uniforms of cavalry troopers through the window. Lieutenant Colonel James Morrison dismounted from his horse with the rigid bearing of a career military man who had spent too many years fighting Apache wars. Behind him rode 20 soldiers, all armed and alert. Sarah had heard of Morrison, a man who believed the only good Apache was a dead Apache, and who had built his reputation on aggressive tactics against all native peoples in the territory. "Ma'am," Morrison said, touching his hat brim as he approached the trading post. His pale eyes took in every detail of the surroundings with the practiced gaze of someone always expecting an ambush. "I'm Lieutenant Colonel Morrison, Territorial Cavalry. I understand you're Sarah McKenna." "I am," Sarah replied, stepping outside to meet him. She kept her voice steady despite the fear crawling up her spine. "What can I do for you, Colonel?" "I'm here about your associations with hostile Apache, ma'am. Specifically, Chief Nalnish and his band." Morrison's voice carried the flat authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed without question. "I have reports that you've been trading with them, possibly providing them with weapons and ammunition." Sarah felt anger flare alongside her fear. "I provide goods to anyone who pays fairly and causes no trouble. That includes Apache who come here peacefully to trade." "Ma'am, these are not peaceful Indians. Nalnish's warriors have been involved in raids across the Mexican border, and they're suspected of stealing cattle from ranches in New Mexico. By trading with them, you may be aiding and abetting hostile acts against American citizens." "I've seen no evidence of hostility from Chief Nalnish or his people," Sarah replied firmly. "They come here to trade fairly, just like any other customers." Morrison stepped closer, his voice dropping to a more threatening tone. "Let me be clear, Mrs. McKenna. The territorial government has decided that all Apache must be removed to reservations within the next 6 months. Anyone found trading with, harboring, or assisting Apache who refuse to comply will be considered in violation of territorial law." Before Sarah could respond, the sound of approaching horses drew everyone's attention. Her heart nearly stopped as she saw Nalnish himself riding toward them, accompanied by 4 warriors. They had clearly seen the cavalry horses and were approaching, with weapons ready though not yet drawn. "Well, well," Morrison said, his hand moving to his sidearm. "Speak of the devil." "Colonel, please," Sarah said urgently. Don't do anything that will start a fight here." Nalnish rode to within 30 yards of the trading post and stopped. His eyes took in the soldiers' positions and the tension in Morrison's posture. When he spoke, his voice was calm but carried clearly across the distance. "I come to trade peacefully, as has been my custom. I see soldiers here. Has the law changed?" Morrison stepped forward, his hand still on his weapon. "Chief Nalnish, I presume. I'm Lieutenant Colonel Morrison. You and your people are ordered to report to the San Carlos reservation within 30 days. Any Apache found off the reservation after that time will be considered hostile and dealt with accordingly." Sarah watched Nalnish's face carefully. She saw no surprise there, only the resigned acceptance of someone who had been expecting this moment. "And if we refuse," he asked, "then you'll be forced to comply," Morrison replied bluntly. "I have 3 companies of cavalry at my disposal, Chief. I'd advise you not to test our resolve." The silence stretched taut as a bowstring. Sarah could feel the disaster building and knew that anything she said might make things worse. But she also knew that doing nothing might lead to bloodshed right here at her brother's trading post. "Colonel Morrison," she said, stepping between the 2 men. "Chief Nalnish came here to trade, as you can see. He's shown no hostility and broken no laws. Surely he can conduct his business and leave peacefully." Morrison's eyes narrowed as he looked at her. "Mrs. McKenna, your sympathy for these savages is noted, but I suggest you remember which side you're on." Sarah felt her temper flare. "I'm on the side of treating all people with basic human decency, Colonel. That seems to be a concept some folks have forgotten." Nalnish had been listening to this exchange with careful attention. Now he dismounted slowly, his hands visible and empty. "I will trade quickly and leave," he said. "I seek no trouble with soldiers or with those who have shown kindness to my people." "You'll trade nowhere," Morrison snapped. "Consider this your official notice, Chief. 30 days to report to San Carlos or face the consequences." Sarah saw something shift in Nalnish's expression, a hardening that spoke of a man being pushed past his limits. But when he spoke, his voice remained controlled. "I understand your words, soldier, but this woman saved the life of my son. I will not bring trouble to her door." He looked directly at Sarah. "We will remember your friendship in the difficult times ahead." As Nalnish and his warriors rode away, Morrison turned back to Sarah with obvious displeasure. "You'd be wise to distance yourself from that Apache, ma'am. The next time I come through here, I better not find any evidence of trade with hostiles." After the soldiers left, Sarah sank onto the trading post's wooden step, her hands shaking with delayed reaction. She had just witnessed the beginning of what could become another Apache war, and she found herself caught directly in the middle of forces far larger than herself. When Thomas returned that evening and heard what had happened, his face went pale. "Morrison's got a reputation for ruthlessness," he said. "If he's been put in charge of removing the Apache, there's going to be blood." Sarah touched the medicine bag Desba had given her, still hanging around her neck. "What do you think Nalnish will do?" Thomas stared out at the desert, now painted purple and gold by the setting sun. "I think he'll try to find a way to protect his people, and I think we may be the only friends he has left in this territory." That night, Sarah lay awake listening to the desert sounds and wondering if the bridge she had hoped to build between 2 worlds was about to be destroyed by forces neither she nor Nalnish could control. The confrontation with Colonel Morrison marked the beginning of the most difficult period in Sarah's life since her arrival in Arizona. Over the following weeks, the atmosphere around Copper Creek grew increasingly tense. Military patrols became more frequent, and Sarah noticed that Apache visitors to the trading post had virtually stopped. The few who did come arrived under cover of darkness and left before dawn, conducting their business with the quiet urgency of people who knew they were being hunted. Thomas grew more worried with each passing day. "We're walking a tightrope, Sarah," he told her one evening as they secured the trading post for the night. "Morrison's got his eye on us now. One wrong move, and we could find ourselves arrested as Apache sympathizers." "Would that be such a terrible thing to be called?" Sarah asked, surprising herself with the question. Thomas looked at her carefully. You've changed since you've been here. The Sarah who came from Kansas 3 months ago wouldn't have said that. She had changed, Sarah realized. The desert had gotten into her blood, and more importantly, her encounter with Nalnish and his people had opened her eyes to complexities she had never considered. These weren't the savage raiders of frontier stories, but people fighting to preserve their way of life in the face of overwhelming odds. The crisis came to a head on a moonless night in early September. Sarah was awakened by the soft sound of pebbles being thrown against her window, a signal Thomas had taught her to recognize as a warning of danger. She dressed quickly and crept to the front of the trading post, where she found Thomas already, waiting with his rifle. "Apache," he whispered, coming in from the north more than usual. Through the darkness, Sarah could make out the shapes of several riders approaching cautiously. As they drew closer, she recognized Nalnish's distinctive silhouette. But something was wrong. Instead of the small trading party she had grown accustomed to, this group included women and children, their possessions bundled hastily on pack horses. Nalnish dismounted and approached the trading post, his face grim in the starlight. "Sarah McKenna," he called softly. "I must speak with you." Sarah stepped outside, ignoring Thomas's whispered protests. "What's happened?" "Morrison's soldiers attacked our camp 2 days ago," Nalnish said, his voice tight with controlled anger. "They claimed we had missed their deadline, though more than a week remains. My warriors fought them off, but 3 of our young men were killed, including my nephew." Sarah felt her heart sink. "I'm so sorry. Now Morrison says we are hostiles. He has sent word that any Apache found off the reservation will be shot on sight." Nalnish paused, looking back at his people who waited in the shadows. "I have come to ask a great favor of you. My people are hungry and need supplies before we decide what path to take." The request hung in the air between them, like a challenge to everything Sarah thought she knew about right and wrong. To help them would be directly defying Morrison's orders and could result in arrest or worse. To refuse would mean abandoning people who had shown her nothing but respect and friendship. "How many do you need to supply?" Sarah asked. Thomas grabbed her arm. "Sarah, you can't be serious if Morrison finds out." "How many?" she repeated, looking directly at Nalnish. 43 people, he replied. "Enough food for 10 days, and ammunition if you can spare it." Sarah thought of swift running water, of Dezba's weathered hands placing the medicine bag around her neck, of Nalnish's dignity in the face of impossible circumstances. The choice, when it came down to it, wasn't really a choice at all. "Thomas, start gathering supplies," she said. "Dried meat, flour, coffee, whatever we can spare." "Sarah, these people saved by my brother. They've never shown us anything but friendship. I won't turn my back on them now." Thomas stared at her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "All right. But we do this fast, and we're smart about it. If Morrison's patrols are out there..." They worked quickly in the darkness, loading pack horses with essential supplies. Sarah included medicine from their small store, blankets, and ammunition for the older rifles some of the Apache carried. Nalnish insisted on paying, producing a small leather pouch of silver coins. "This is not charity," he said firmly. "We trade as equals, as we always have." As the Apache prepared to disappear back into the desert, Nalnish approached Sarah one final time. "You have made a choice tonight that puts you in great danger. Why?" Sarah considered the question, thinking of all the reasons she could give: moral obligation, human decency, simple friendship. But in the end, she gave him the truth. "Because you're not my enemy, and I won't pretend you are just because someone else says so." Nalnish nodded slowly. "The path ahead is dark for both our peoples, but perhaps there is hope if there are still those willing to see past fear to what is right." He mounted his horse and was about to ride away when swift running water ran up to Sarah. The boy pressed something into her hand, another smooth stone, this one a deep red color. "From the sacred canyon," Nalnish explained. "He wants you to remember that courage comes in many forms." After they left, Sarah and Thomas sat in the trading post, surrounded by the evidence of what they had done. Empty shelves and depleted supplies told the story of their choice. "What happens now?" Thomas asked. "Now we wait," Sarah replied, touching the red stone the boy had given her. "And we hope we did the right thing." 3 days later, Morrison returned with twice as many soldiers. His pale eyes took in the reduced inventory and the subtle signs of recent heavy activity. But despite a thorough search and aggressive questioning, he found no direct evidence of what had occurred. "I know what you did, Mrs. McKenna," he said, before leaving. "And I'll be watching. Next time I'll be ready." After the soldiers left, Sarah walked to the lake where she had first met swift running water. The desert sunset painted the water in shades of gold and crimson, and she thought about the choice she had made. She knew there would be consequences, that Morrison would make good on his threats. But as she watched the sun disappear behind the mountains, she also knew she could live with her decision. In her pocket, she carried 2 stones, one blue from the bottom of the lake, one red from a sacred canyon. Together, they represented something that no amount of military force or political pressure could destroy: the simple human capacity to choose compassion over fear, understanding over hatred. The bridge between worlds that she had hoped to build might be burned by others, but the foundation would remain. And sometimes, Sarah reflected as she made her way back to the trading post, a foundation was enough to build on when the time was right. The desert wind carried the scent of sage and the promise of rain, reminding her that even in the harshest landscapes, life found a way to endure and sometimes even flourish. As she reached the trading post where Thomas waited with coffee and companionship, Sarah knew she was exactly where she belonged, standing between worlds, choosing hope over fear, one small act of courage at a time.